really appreciate it.
Good, I'm so glad he said that. He gets. Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thanks so much.
Good evening and welcome to Poetry at the Dalí. I'm Hank Hine and it's my honor to receive you tonight, welcome you tonight. This program is supported by the city of St. Petersburg. We're very happy for their sponsorship. And it is curated by Helen Pruitt Wallace, who could not be with us tonight. And our habit in this program is to ask Helen to read a poem to begin. And I have exacted that price from her in her absence as well. And she has chosen a poem for me to present to you. This is, again, Helen Pruitt Wallace. And the poem is called Pet Rock. You kept it in its perforated box so it could breathe, and placed it on your desk by a cup filled with clips and rubber bands. It came with a training manual, 32 pages of suggested commands. Sit and stay was stupid, but roll over and attack. Nudging. Mostly it perched on a straw mound like a toy Christ in a plastic creche. It was a joke, a brilliant hoax to make money. But soon you caught yourself glancing at it, rubbing the smooth curve of its belly. Over time, you envied it, the cool demeanor, the inscrutability. Always drawn to loners, you found yourself happier in its presence. Eventually, as you do in most relationships, you asked too many questions. Would it last? Were you good together? You meant to take it lightly, but realized as you held it against your cheek, you were attached. You bought one for everybody. Why not? Everyone seemed lonely. The widow down the street, your distant aunt, a student who looked so sad and loaded, and cousin, recently divorced. For $2, they too might feel complete. But this grew bigger than you. The nation crazed, and you were glad, happy to be part of it. But one day, as you sat in your locked room, holding your stone lightly in your palm, you recognized an old familiar feeling, that distance stacking up between you. Your rock, awkward and cool, you with your needy demands. The director of our programming here, Dr. Kim McQuarrie, is going to come up now and introduce Denise Duhamel, our poet tonight. And you are in for a treat with her poetry. Kim, would you come up and introduce Denise for our audience?
It is my pleasure. And I think that Helen's poem was quite appropriate because I think that blend of levity with poignancy and with what I would consider deep philosophical implications, I think are also hallmarks of Denise's poetry. So thank you, Helen. Denise Duhamel earned her BFA at Emerson College and her MFA at Sarah Lawrence College. Of course, she has a prolific list of publications, but I'd like to highlight her most recent books of poetry, which are Second Story and Scald. And for those of you who are interested, Those are right outside, courtesy of Tombolo Books, and we're lucky enough to have the author of those volumes here in case you would like to have your very own signature. Blowout from 2013 was also a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. She and the late Maureen Seaton co-authored 5 collections, the most recent of which was Caprice. Her nonfiction publications include The Unrhymables, Collaborations in Prose, and among the many honors and awards, Denise is a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. In addition, in her spare time, she is a distinguished university professor in the MFA program at Florida International University in Miami. And I can say that, I have had many laughs and insightful moments reading her work, and I am very pleased and honored to have her here with us tonight. So please join me in welcoming Denise Duhamel.
I'm going to grab water. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you, Hank. And thank you, Joy. And thank you to Danny, who brought me here, literally, physically, took me here. And thank you all so much for coming. I wanted to give a special thank you to Helen, who can't be here tonight, but I think she's watching. So hello, Helen. And thank you. Helen is the one who invited me and arranged so much of this evening. So thank you, Helen, and thank you all for coming. I thought by way of introduction, I would read a poem from Scald. And the only thing you have to remember, maintain, or keep in mind is that my name is Denise, which I know you just heard, but sometimes you'd be surprised. People forget. So that's important to the poem, because this is called On the Occasion of Typing My First Email on a Brand New Phone. When I signed Denise, autocorrect suggests Denise Richards, which makes my ex-husband Charlie Sheen, which makes me a mother of 3 daughters and sometimes more, as I also volunteer to take care of the twins Charlie fathered with his 3rd wife, Brooke Mueller, while she's in rehab. In my new identity, I'm 10 years younger, a lot skinnier, but I haven't read much. In my new identity, I get breast implants so I can be in Wild Things, for which I become pretty famous because of a sex scene with Nev Campbell in a pool. But after that, my acting goes nowhere. Except for bit parts and my now canceled reality show, It's Complicated, which only runs for a year and for which Charlie calls me greedy and vain. Sure, I get to be in The World Is Not Enough, but Entertainment Weekly rates me the worst Bond girl of all time. In my new identity, I still have a sister named Michelle. I'm still French-Canadian, raised Roman Catholic. I still get to be a writer. But when I'm Denise Richards, instead of poems, I publish a memoir, The Real Girl Next Door. I'm a New York Times bestseller, but deep down I know it's not because I wield a great sentence. In my new identity, instead of overeating, I get more plastic surgery and pose for Playboy when my marriage heads south and I no longer feel sexy and just want to prove something. In my new identity, my mother has passed, but my father is still alive, going to the millionaire matchmaker to look for new love. Though I'm no genius, I'm generally respected because I don't badmouth anyone, even when I'm on Howard Stern. I repeatedly decline to talk about the restraining order or any of Sheen's public subsequent meltdowns. What's the point? Besides, I need to protect my kids. There aren't too many famous Denises, and I wonder why my phone, if it's that smart, doesn't suggest Levertov. When I erase Richards, autocorrect still doesn't recognize who I am. As I try to resign, Samsung asks if I'm sure I'm just a plain old Denise. Might I really mean denies, or maybe demise? So now, I guess Denise Richards, that was published in 2017. So now Denise Richards is even more famous because she's one of those Real Housewives in some franchise. So now her name comes up even more. So I'll never escape her. This next poem is called Folkways, and this is from Second Story. Folkways. I see the sea getting closer. I read we'll soon run out of drinking water. I flossed the steak out of my teeth. I should be vegan. Even the teenager told me so. She said I had the right sandals and earrings. I step off the plane, look up my carbon footprints. Greenland is melting due in part to my recent Google search. All my dead iPhones, along with scraps of bologna and turkey bones, add to the landfill populated by vultures in some countries, child scavengers in others. I buy South American fruit and North American groceries. Sustainability is a hoax, the article says, but I recycle anyway, cycle instead of drive when I can. Emma evacuates Santa Barbara, wildfire in her rearview mirror, a laptop covered in ash, and a few books in her trunk. I say goodbye to my furniture and clothes whenever I evacuate for yet another hurricane, decide what to bring, what to leave behind. My friend's favorite joke, what is the population of Bombay? Wait a second, let me check my watch. When I was young and naive, I had a foster child from Bangladesh. This was before I knew how much the charity's CEO was making. I was an adjunct in New York City with 3 jobs, but knew I was rich by comparison. I could pretend I was a good person. My sanitized love and concern reflected in the drawings the child sent. I started to volunteer instead at the Catholic Worker, ladling soup and oatmeal into plastic bowls. The homeless smelled like I would have smelled if I didn't have running water or a toothbrush or quarters for the laundromat. Eileen Miles slept outside their New York City apartment with the homeless, but was sure not to use any resources the displaced needed. Miles took their own food so that the truly needy could get first dibs on dumpster bagels. Unless you have no toilet paper, you can't imagine how precious it is. No tampons or moisturizer or shampoo. I live in Florida now, where a graying man makes his home on the beach. He is a war vet, my neighbors say, but I am not sure which war. There have been so many. He showers where others simply rinse off sand. He waited out Irma in a shelter while I drove away with friends. Now he sleeps near the restrooms in the park and shuffles down to the surf, takes his morning swim. When he catches me leaving him half a roasted chicken, he says thanks for the delivery. He says maybe his luck is changing. Maybe one day soon the ocean will come to him. Thanks, thank you. This next poem is called I Love Sex in All Its Forms. And I wrote it after I had to go into my spam file a couple of years back, when things go missing and someone says, check your spam file. And I was shocked what was in my spam file. And the spam thinks that I'm a man, a straight man, and they're all kind of lovely ladies waiting to meet me. So this was, I Love Sex in All Its Forms, was actually the subject heading of a spam email from someone named Mindy. So when I saw it, I was so confused that I thought pantoum, because I'm a poet, I was like, I didn't think of, anyway, so I thought of a poetic form, the pantoum. So I made a found pantoum, and all these lines are lines actually from either the subject heading of these emails, or I have to admit, I opened a couple to get more. So this is called I Love Sex in All Its Forms, spam email from Mindy. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and wet. Being in love, a blessing or a curse. My boner brew will make you a better screw. I've just added 3 new naked photos. Being in love, a blessing or a curse. Text me, I guarantee we'll have a blast. I just added 3 new naked photos. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Text me, I guarantee we'll have a blast. What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Need a hot date with a sexy lady? What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Need a hot date with a sexy lady? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. Here are some other girls you might like. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Here are some other girls you might like. Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. It's raining men, and I need one. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? My boner brew will make you a better screw. It's raining men, and I need one. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and dry. Oh, thank you. It seems really unfair because I didn't really write any of that, but I was completely mesmerized by these messages. The next two poems I'm going to read are old poems, and in 1997, I published a book called Kinky, and all those poems were about a feminist take or sort of a social take on Barbie, the doll. And with the movie that came out last summer, I found that they're fun to revisit. So I'm just going to read two. This one's very short. It's called Buddhist Barbie. In the 5th century BC, an Indian philosopher, Gautama, teaches all is emptiness and there is no self. In the 20th century AD, Barbie agrees, but wonders how a man with such a belly could pose smiling and without a shirt. And this is the title poem. It's called Kinky. And in the movie, if any of you saw the movie, there's a point where Ken wants to spend the night at Barbie's dream house, and Barbie says, "Why?" And Ken says, "I don't know." But mine's a little like less PG rated. So they figure it out in this one. Kinky. They decide to exchange heads. Barbie squeezes the small opening under her chin over Ken's bulging neck socket. His wide jawline jostles atop his girlfriend's body, loosely like one of those nodding novelty dogs destined to gaze from the back windows of cars. The two dolls chase each other around the orange country camper, unsure what they'll do when they're within touching distance. Ken wants to feel Barbie's toes between his lips, take off one of her legs and force his whole arm inside her. With only the vaguest suggestion of genitals, all the alluring qualities they possess as fashion dolls up until now have done neither of them much good. But suddenly, Barbie is excited, looking at her own body under the weight of Ken's face. He is part circus freak, part thwarted hermaphrodite, and she is imagining she is somebody else, maybe somebody middle class and ordinary, maybe another teenage model being caught in a scandal. The night had begun with Barbie getting angry at finding Ken's blow-up doll folded and stuffed under the couch. He was defensive and ashamed, especially about not even having the breath to inflate her. But after a round of pretend tears, Barbie and Ken vowed to try to make their relationship work. With their good memories as sustaining as good food, they listened to late-night radio talk shows, one featuring Dr. Ruth. When all else fails, just hold each other, the small sex therapist crooned. Barbie and Ken, on cue, groped in the dark, their interchangeable skin glowing, the color of Band-Aids. Then they let themselves go. Soon Barbie was begging Ken to try on her spandex miniskirt. She showed him how to pivot as though he were on a runway. Ken begged to tie Barbie onto his yellow surfboard and spin her on the kitchen table until she grew dizzy. Anything, they both said to the other's requests, their married desires bubbling from the most unlikely places. Thank you, thanks. Thank you. So I was born in 1961, so the feminist people I was reading was the second wave. I mean, I'm reading third wave now, but the second wave was really formative to me. In Scald, I dedicated a lot of poems to feminist thinkers of that time. And so Shulamith Firestone, I don't know if anyone remembers her the way I do. She was really out there. And she's called Shuli in this poem. That was her nickname, Shuli. And she, like, very radical. And she argued in one of her books that advanced technology would free women from childbirth and their capacity and vulnerability during pregnancy. So like test tube babies and things of that nature. And of course, you know, other feminists were shocked and said, no, no. And then Andrea Dworkin, I'm going to mention as well. She was very active in the anti-pornography movement in the 80s. So anyway, this poem is long, just to warn you. It's called How Deep It Goes, and it's from Scald. And so I'll mention Shuli and Andrea Dworkin. How Deep It Goes. I loved Shuli for writing that giving birth is like shitting a pumpkin, and that childhood is a supervised nightmare. It was easy for me to decide I didn't want kids. Reared on Andrea Dworkin, it was also easy for a while to rule out intercourse. Can an occupied people, physically occupied inside, internally invaded, be free? When Dworkin died in 2005, an anchor on Fox made a crude joke, and Kathy Young called her a sad ghost that feminism needs to exorcise. Some of us knew Dworkin was onto something, but Shulamith Firestone knew we'd probably shut it down. Feminists have to question not just all of Western culture, but the organization of culture itself, and further, even the very organization of nature. Many women give up in despair. If that's how deep it goes, they don't want to know. Which leads me to women who want children, which leads me to women who get 3 months parental leave, and that's it. I'm talking about US in 2015, but what about China, where foot binding was legal until 1912, which leads me to human history. Plato wasn't down with women's rights, as such a shift could alter the household and the state. And Aristotle thought a woman's work had no value. The Enlightenment was not so enlightened when it came to women, which leads me to searching for historical blips of female equality. Spartan women got some glory if their sons were warriors. Those moms could own land and take care of estates. In 3rd century BCE, Stoics believed that men and women should wear the same clothing, enter marriage, not as a biological imperative, but as equals. Stoics had a good 800-year run until deemed pagan by Christians, all their schools were shut down. Quakers believed women and men were spiritually one and the same. Margaret Fell in 1668 wrote Women's Speaking Justified, arguing for a female ministry. In 1782, before the word feminism came into being, Mary Wollstonecraft pled her case in a vindication of the rights of women, that marriage should be between two partners, not a father, husband, and a vain child wife who sacrifices her life to libertine notions of beauty. Which leads me to New Zealand in 1893, the first of many countries to give women the right to vote. The ERA put up a good yet losing fight. Birth control, 1975 declared International Women's Year, which leads me to Russia's feminazi, Phyllis Schlafly, the moral majority, the post-feminist label, rape as genocide, 500,000 women in 1994 in Rwanda. Dworkin again, can those without a biologically based physical integrity have self-respect? Which leads me to Rousseau and his natural law, that certain men, white, are superior to women and all people of other races because men are rational animals, which leads me to men and their rational wars, which leads me to the animal kingdom. The lion that kills the cubs of his predecessor, the male seed beetle with his barbed penis, gangs of bottlenose dolphins kidnapping females, which leads me again to Shuli's despair. It's a good thing women are long-term thinkers because it's going to take a while until feminism is no longer a theory, but a reality, says reluctant feminist Nancy Hopkins, cancer researcher at MIT, which leads me to plastic surgery or the death of feminism, which leads me to Pink's spot holders, hands that could shovel and make snowballs without gloves. All those years of baking, from the freezer to the proof rack to the ovens, made your hands what they were. Your poker hands, which dealt the cards for pitch and 21. You were serious when you played, tapping the table so we'd pay attention. You had nicks and cuts and burns you shrugged off, just like you shrugged off the surgery. We were so sure you would come around, sore, yes, depressed, maybe. We'd read up on all of the side effects of the procedure, but you were ready, fearless, man of Bayer and Vicks, the only medicines you really believed in. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry I was a jerk so much of the time. I'm sorry I was such a spoiled brat. You only bought one luxury your whole life, a leather lounge chair. Well, I wanted a guitar, a new coat like the other girls, brand name jeans, a bike, and money for the movies. I grabbed everything with my weak hands that turn blue in a cold room, ricochet when the faucet runs too hot, hands that get chapped doing simple things like dishes. Now that you are no longer here, sometimes my hands become your hands when they are empty and still and grateful, when I fold them to pray the way you did, when I help someone like you helped me the morning I woke up with a hangover after a high school party. You poured me a glass of orange juice and plucked a pickle from the jar and put it on a saucer. The combination worked, our very own father and daughter dance. Soon after, we went to the airport so I could board my first plane to travel farther than you or Mom had ever been. I stooped, having second thoughts, my paisley suitcase suddenly too heavy. Mom told me we could turn around, that I could stay home, and you told Mom, honey, you've got to let her go. After the agent took my ticket, I turned and waved, my pudgy fingers, my purple polish already starting to chip. Then I followed the other travelers to the rest of my life, scuffing along in my sneakers, one of your baseball caps on my head. Thank you, thanks. This next poem is called Prodical Prayer, and I started reading it actually after Helen gave a really good reading at Writers in Paradise, and she's working on a book of poems about her mother's passing, and I'm working on a book of poems about my own mother's passing, and I hadn't really read them so much, but after she read, I thought I'm gonna do it too. So this is called Prodical Prayer. I think that's all you need to know. Prodical Prayer. I kneel before my mother, trying to get her slipper socks over her swollen feet. Then she presses the remote control on her recliner to push her to an almost standing position. Once upright, she is not steady enough to get to the walker alone. Our goal to get her to the bathroom on time. Shame, then tears. She soaks her depends because of a water pill that's supposed to help her puffy legs, but nothing, it seems, is helping. This is a week before her second fall, the bad one, before the pneumonia and sippy cups, before her right arm no longer works, before the fingers on her right hands go numb. Even when I put a pen between them, she will not be able to sign her name. This is before the hospital and more sippy cups, one with the Nego logo on loan from her great-grandson. This is before her stint in rehab, where Doug will try to teach her to put on socks with a blue plastic device she slips over her calf, a rope she holds in her good left hand. She will keep cheese popcorn in the seat of her walker and offer some to Doug, who looks like Matt Damon. She will be like a girl with a crush. She misses my dad, dead 11 years, but some days is angry he left her. This is before I drive her 20-year-old Toyota to see her in the Catholic nursing home, where the priest reminds us this too shall pass. I will think about my mother passing water, about her ultimate passing, her eventual death. I question if her pain will indeed pass, if what is passing through her body will keep on passing, looping into her, the morphine drip not enough to dilute the pangs in her spine, her neck, sciatic nerves running down both her legs. A chorus of nuns will sing while playing maracas and tambourines. One sister will drop her percussion as she falls asleep mid-song. This will be funny, then touching, then ultimately so profound, I become my mother taking care of a 2-year-old me. I become my mother who puts a pillow under my stomach when I can't breathe. With cupped hands, she pats my back, just the way the doctors showed her. The doctor who says to pretend my back is a bongo drum. When the fever comes, she rubs my arms with alcohol and flips the pillow under my head to the cool side, puts a bucket near my bed, as I am sure to vomit. When we go to La Salette Shrine to see the Christmas lights, I mistake the basin for donations near baby Jesus' cradle as a puke pail. All the kneeling people around us laugh, guessing perhaps what a sick child I am, and how many nights my mother sits up with me with Vicks and antibiotics, inhalers, and picture books to help calm the cats who live in my chest, making strange wheezing sounds. I'm allergic to cats and dogs and even stuffed animals, grass in the summer and leaves in the fall, lilacs which blossom in spring, and my lungs can't take the winter cold. No wonder my mother wraps the statue of the Virgin Mary she kept by her marital bed and puts it in the bottom drawer. The Virgin helped her get pregnant, but after me, she's had quite enough. Soon, my mother is again with child anyway. She tells me how I still wanted all the attention, and as soon as my mother started nursing my sister, I put my hand in the diaper pail and stare at her, daring her to make me stop. When JFK was shot and my mother wept in front of the television, I blocked her view with my 2-year-old body and peed on the carpet. Now it is my mother peeing, mortified, drenching her nightgown. She once changed my diapers, and now I change hers. Oh, little mother, my helpless daughter, please forgive me, for I have sinned. It has been years since my last confession, my last therapy session. Hail Mary Jane brownies, please help my mother's appetite, please help her to sleep. Hail Mary, full of grace, please heal my mother's bruised face. Thanks, thank you. As you might have guessed, I grew up Catholic. I guess it's pretty obvious from the poem. And so this terrible thing happened. So my mother got very sick and went into a nursing home in December of 2020. I said, don't worry, Mom, I'm coming there. Like, I live in Florida, she lives in Rhode Island. I'll be there every other weekend. I got my miles, points, and lined up. And of course, COVID came and she was just stuck. And it was a nursing home where she had worked. She was a nurse. My mom was a nurse, a retired nurse. So she had worked there as a young woman herself. So I think she felt, it was very circular and weird, but she really liked the nurses. And I don't know if they really liked her, but they humored her a lot. And she had all this nurse advice for them. So this is a little poem about that. Snow globe. My mother tells me the nurses dress like astronauts. Mount St. Rita must go on the assumption that if any of the patients could be infected. The RNs complain that it's hot under their masks and visors, gowns, and jumpsuits. My mother suggests the nurses open the window for air, even though it's chilly, even though it's a nor'easter. All they had to do was get me a blanket. Poor things, they're working so hard. Then her room is a globe, everyone's world shaken, snowflakes and stars. Thanks. And this next one, so of course, if any of you had relatives in a nursing home, they were confined to a room, right? So there's no more events, no more piano night, no more of any of these things. So this is called Now That My Mother Isn't Allowed to Walk in the Halls. Now that my mother isn't allowed to walk in the halls, the pain from her arthritis is getting even worse. The palliative care doctor is trying a new med, but it gives my mom nightmares. Last night, she started screaming for Joan, her roommate, who pressed the help button as my mother couldn't find her own help button, didn't know in that moment she even had a help button. Yesterday, my mom told me they'd stopped feeding her, but when I called the nurse's desk, Maria tells me she was confused, but still ate half of her pancakes. My mom asks why I won't come to visit. For a minute, she's forgotten about COVID and the extra snacks in her drawer. In another nightmare, she is part of a medical experiment. She laughs a little now that she realizes it was all a hallucination. Maybe she's watched too much horror on Netflix, she says. And you won't believe this, but in another dream, there was a man in my bed, and it wasn't your father. I say, have fun, but be careful. I don't want another little sister. And I am so relieved when she laughs that she gets my joke that I tell her another. Michelle Wolf says that the virus is nature's way of saying, go to your room and think about what you've done. Oh, thanks. That was like the first COVID joke I heard. It was Michelle Wolf. I was like, yep, she's right, she's right. So I got to see my mom. She was, after 17 months, they finally, let us see her. But by then, I think she was just holding on to say goodbye. She didn't get COVID, but so many of her friends died, right? During that 40 plus people died in that particular nursing home. So I finally got to see her, which was great, but she was very different and weak. And I saw her in May, and she passed by July. But at least we could be with her, which is good. All right, so this is called Mercy. Just yesterday, her great-grandsons picked up baby toads and let them hop from their thumbs. I hold her hand and rub her arms and tell her she can let go. The toads landed in the grass where the boys were afraid to step on them. I'm thinking about my mom landing somewhere soft and green, when even my rubbing hurts her, when she says, "Please don't touch me." And this is called Old Lady Smell. My mother made me promise to tell her if she ever started to smell like an old lady. My fastidious mother, who dusted every Saturday, who never left a dish in the sink overnight, who loved taking showers no matter how dangerous they'd become, who always lifted the lid of her Tupperware and sniffed her leftovers before eating, who always ran the kitchen fan when she cooked, who always ran the bathroom fan when she pooped, who put a chicken carcass in the freezer until the day of trash pickup, since she didn't want even her garbage bin to reek, made me pinky square. I kept waiting for a human sour stink in her house, in the nursing home, in the hospital, in hospice, on her body, but such a smell never came. It was as though my mother was a saint, like little Rose of Woonsocket, who died a few months before my mother was born, who performed miracles, who wore the stigmata, who cured the ailments of others, who had a crippling arthritis like my mother, who, unlike my mother, died young, whose followers had her grave dug up to see if she could be canonized by the Catholic Church, whose body hadn't decomposed, whose coffin emanated the scent of roses. Thanks. There's this whole cult now, which I grew up knowing, like this little Rose. Everyone talked about her because I grew up in a Catholic family. And now in Woonsocket, the town I grew up in, there's actually like a little shrine to her, and it's kind of fascinating, actually. So I want to go. This is called Two More Purses. And it's after Gertrude Stein, who wrote, "A purse was not green, it was not straw color, it was hardly seen, and it had a long use, and the chain was never missing, it was not misplaced, it showed that it was open, that is all that it showed." When my mother passed, I emptied her white purse, tissue pack and reading glasses, coupons and address book. I once lived in the purse inside her, my first pink home, the knotted strap and umbilical cord. When I grew up, I took care of my own purse, its pristine lining, never stretched or stuffed with a fetus. I waxed the buckles, polished the pink clit, the tender button that opened and closed my clutch. I carried pleasure inside me, my lips keeping so many secrets. I tipped my mother's empty purse upside down, its vulnerable silk insides torn. Thanks, thank you. And then I have two more poems, and then Q&A if you wish. This poem is called "I Have Slept in Many Places," and it's after Diane Seuss, I just took her line, and I thought, oh, that's such a cool idea. All right, I have slept in many places. First in the womb, my own space capsule in my mother's universe, my eyelids sticky with pre-birth. Then the incubator and crib, which I didn't recognize as a prison until years later when my sister stood inside it and I, rising from my first big girl bed, unlatched her because she was hungry for breakfast. Then my Grammy's four-poster, kitty sleeping bag, the hospital bed where I was hoarse after I relinquished my tonsils. A mat during kindergarten nap time, the back seat of my mother's car, another hospital bed with silver bars on the side where I wrote my first stories. The double bed I shared with my sister when our twins gave out. A college dorm mattress with another girl's period stain. A damp study abroad bed in Wales, Uriel seats where I could sleep overnight and save money on a hostel if I picked the right schedule. Hostel bunk beds with bathrooms down the hall, a friend's water bed, another friend's bed on her father's boat. Then my cousin's hand-me-down mattress in my first apartment in Boston, a boyfriend's bed in Revere, a bed of another boy hoping to make my Revere boyfriend jealous. Sublet beds, a bed in a furnished studio apartment in Tucson where there was no way of knowing who'd slept in it before me. Futon in the East Village right on the floor, same futon on a used loft bed to suspend me above the mice. Then a lavender pull-out Mary Richards couch. Vacation beds, hotel beds, more boyfriend beds in Brooklyn and Alphabet City. Florida marital bed and another hospital bed, this time surgery. Divorce bed, same as marital bed with mattress flipped for good luck. Evacuation beds during hurricanes, my true love's bed with its magic mattress topper. I know I'm forgetting so many places, subways, lounge chairs in the sand, Amtrak seats, movie theaters, hammocks, my niece's college graduation I had taken a Vicodin, conference beds, beds at colleges after I'd given a poetry reading, emergency row plane seats on my mother's breast when I was an infant, in my father's arms after a childhood asthma attack, my parents' bed after their deaths. I'm heading for the hard coffin bed myself, my eyes sewn shut against insomnia. I've asked the undertaker to press glow-in-the-dark stars on the inside lid. Thank you. Thanks. And I'll end with this, this dear memory, and this is the last poem and second story. And thank you again for listening. Dear memory, what have you done with my keys? I blame you, though it's hard to hold a grudge these days because I actually don't remember why I was angry in the first place. I look at a person, sure she's done me wrong, though the inciting incidents are lost. Former students seem familiar, but their names disperse like cigarette smoke, blowing towards a stool where I once drank myself sick. Now I'm not even sure what city that bar was in, the welcoming pink neon letters, another cloud, as though I am looking at tiny print without my reading glasses. I was on a pink cloud when I first stopped drinking. In fact, I once looked up at the moon, weeping in gratitude. So there, I do recall something. I was walking across the Brooklyn Bridge in an ex's sweatpants, though I'm not sure any more of his name or if I ever gave those sweatpants back. I'm usually halfway through a movie on Netflix when I realize I've already seen it, probably in an old-fashioned freestanding theater, perhaps a matinee or a midnight screening, perhaps a popcorn bucket on my lap, that is, if I wasn't on some fad diet. Did I take my pain pill or not? I'm drinking water, but not sure I can detect that bad taste all the way back on my tongue. Maybe I've been drinking more water than I thought. Is it time to go to the gynecologist again? The office usually sends me a reminder postcard, but today I'm holding a letter from the breast center saying it's time again for my mammogram. I usually get a prescription from the gynecologist about a month beforehand. This is how it's been these last few years. I wonder if my doctor is retired or dead. I would call him, but I have forgotten his name. It begins with an S, and I think I remember the exit. I look through a stack of business cards I save for moments such as this, but no card for him. I go to take out the recycling just moments after I took out the recycling. I stand at the fridge, its door ajar, the cold light bulb, an idea for a poem which I've also forgotten. A sublime dream that woke me in the middle of the night, a sublime dream I was sure I'd never forget. Ah, here is my key ring, but this gold one with the big square head, what lock could it possibly open? Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. Perfect. Hi.
we are also stepping in for Helen this evening. Can everybody hear her okay, even in the back? She did ask us to share how disappointed that she was not to be here in person, but Hank and I will do our level best.
We will. We'll try to goad you with questions.
All right.
And we welcome the audience's participation. I think this is the kind of poetry that makes you feel comfortable that you can ask questions about the poet and the poetic method, both of the person. And I'd like to start with one. The French-Canadian background, the Catholicism, reminds us of a hero in our own town. We have a bar that he frequented, and the home in which he died, Jack Kerouac.
Oh, I know, right? Yes, yes.
So
Fantastic.
The question is a little bit about that heritage, Woonsocket and
Yes.
Rhode Island and Massachusetts and the Quebecois.
Yes, that's a great question. So there's actually a church where my parents were married. It's called St. Anne's, and it's in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. And they call it the Sistine Chapel of New England because there was a painter who had, can you hear me okay? Yeah, a painter who had studied in Italy. I think this was in the 30s, maybe. And he loved churches. And if you look on, like, there's all the saints on the ceiling, but they're all the townspeople. So he had people you could model for him to be, whatever saint. And you got paid, I think it was like a peanut butter sandwich. And like, isn't that fantastic? Yeah, so it's quite interesting. So, I mean, I'm a very lapsed Catholic and, I wasn't very good at it because it kind of connects to feminism too, because I just remember asking, I wanted to be an altar boy. I didn't hear the word boy. I just wanted to be like, ding, ding, ding. And they're like, oh no, you can't, you're a girl. And then I had all these questions and, so I didn't make my confirmation, but I did make my first communion, which was scary enough because they told you if you bit the host, blood would come in your mouth.
Oh.
It was very gothic and weird. It was a really intense Catholicism.
And did you hear French? Did you hear Quebecois?
Yes.
Was that part of what's in your ear?
Yes.
And your sense of
Yes.
rhythm and poetry?
Yes. So my dad was born in Canada, so English was his second language. So my mom, at the time, it's really sad, but I know she did it out of love, but at the time, French Canadians were called, especially there, were like Canucks or Canuck, and it was a slur, and associated with all the slurs you'd have for anybody. And my mom's like, I don't want them speaking French. So my dad wouldn't speak French to us, right? Because he didn't want us, but we have all these things like, throw me down the stairs, my shoes. Like, you know what I mean? Like we tend to invert, because my dad would say things when he was translating from the French in his head. Like he had really cool phrases like that. But it's one of my big regrets in life that I don't speak French.
So are those inversions that you
Sometimes,
gave us an example of?
yeah.
Are they part of your poetic process?
Yeah, and I don't even know I'm doing them half the time. But yeah, it actually is fun because even when I correct them, or I see them in my writing, I like the idea of putting clauses and really long sentences. I think was part of the French Canadian, so I like really long sentences. Clause, all the way through.
That's a really stimulating thought, because not to be too pedantic, but the languages that derive from Latin started losing their structure, in which the endings of words would indicate what the relation to the other words were, and we rely on word order essentially to differentiate potential conflicting meanings. So when you invert like that, you get a different feel, that's poetry.
Yes, I agree. And like line breaks, doing, like a sentence that maybe if you're teaching composition and someone hands it in, you're like, "Ugh, it's not a dangling modifier," but somehow in poetry, if you make a line break and put something, you kind of get away with that a little more and get double meanings and stuff. Yeah, it's fun. That's a great observation.
So something that was, I think, as deeply ingrained, obviously as your background, your love for your family comes through so strongly in these poems. But I want to come back to something you said when we were talking about Catholicism and wanting to be an altar person.
Now they actually they finally did it. I'm too old, but they have altar servers now. Too late for me, but
you made a comment, and I want to go back to the Barbie. Barbie poems. I don't know if it's my age or why those hit me so hard when I read them. But I think it was really interesting because in another poem you talked about the idea of feminist thinking and how we have to be so good at thinking because our actuality it's not there.
Right.
And so I wondered, having written that book in the 90s and this movie just coming out in the past year, what did you think about that?
Thank you. I actually liked the movie quite a lot. It was very familiar, I would say. I mean, I don't think Greta Gerwig has any idea who I am, but I'm like, oh, I made that joke. I kind of was like, knew what the jokes were going to be because to me, they're so obvious. But to me, the idea of like corporate America or Mattel in on it is so fascinating because when so my book came out in 97, so around 93, 94, an actor did a one-woman show dressed as Barbie and, had all this physical comedy in it. And we got a cease and desist order from Mattel. I mean, this wasn't on Broadway. This wasn't even off Broadway. It was like Avenue C, like way, way off Broadway. But we had, we called it American Doll, come meet the real Barbie, blah, blah, blah. And somehow Mattel had spies at that point, and there was a whole thing too where artists were being like I think it was Cindy Sherman. I'm pretty sure it was Cindy Sherman had a photograph of a Barbie with a black eye, and it was called "But Ken Says He's Sorry." Mattel sued. You know what I mean? And now they would probably go for it because they're like, well, we can tell, like the way they had Weird Barbie, and now there is a Weird Barbie you can actually buy. So I don't know if that's progress or not. It's a little spooky because they're like, okay, we'll make fun of ourselves if we can buy more things. But I think Greta Gerwig was like a genius in that she got them to let her do it. It's all so, I don't know, it's very confusing in a way.
You mentioned also, just to follow up on the people who've influenced you, and I mentioned obviously Andrea Dworkin, and I noticed in other poems that I read that you were also referencing other second waves, Betty, Gloria, and you said now you're reading third wave. So what do you think has been this transition from second wave to third wave feminism, and how do you feel that's impacted the poetry you're writing now as opposed to the poetry you've written in the past?
Right, that is such a good question because...
Would you describe for our audience these different waves?
Oh, yeah. So first wave feminism would have been like suffragettes, the right to vote, like that, 20s. When did we get the right to 20? I should know this. I'm a bad feminist. Joan of Arc is way like, pre-wave feminism would be like Joan of Arc, or like women through history. There'd be these blips, right, of like really strong women, and but second wave. So I was I think why I embraced it so much is that it was part of our pop culture. Or my pop culture. So I remember in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, was very Catholic, very kind of strict school. It wasn't a Catholic school, it was a public school, but strict. We had a teacher in 6th grade that would play, it was the first year where boys and girls could sit together, and we had integrated recess, co-ed recess, and it was like, things are changing, and the boys, the same thing. They were all, it wasn't even like, it was just like, we're evolving. And she used to play Helen Reddy's I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar every morning because it was popular. And the boys and the girls, we were like dancing to it. So to me, it was like, of course it's going to happen, right? The ERA, it's got to happen. This is crazy. It's got to, blah, blah, blah. And then Roe v. Wade, all that stuff was like part of my like coming of age. So I just felt like it was going to go one way, the right way, like emancipation for all, and of course now we're in a terrible backlash. But yeah, so I think, so the second wave would have been like Andrea Dworkin, Betty Friedan, Ms. Gloria Steinem. So those kind of people, they were like the mainstream. I think a lot, like even I think my mom probably read Betty Friedan. But then like Andrea Dworkin and Mary Daly and Sheila Firestone were like very like, we should have our own islands, ladies. Like we're gonna, it was really, but even though it was theoretical and it never came to be, it was fascinating to me. So that would have been the second wave. And then the third wave now is much more, I guess I should let someone younger, is anyone third wave in here? I feel like I'm gonna screw it up. I feel like, but more, trans rights, we were like at second wave. I remember, this is horrible, going to see Andrea Dworkin it was like the early 80s, I guess. And it was very moving. She read, she had been a rape victim. She had worked in, she was amazing. She read this really great thing. And people were asking her questions like this. And a man asked a question, like a really sweet man. And she was like, get out. It was like, she's like, I don't want men in here. And like, I left with 10 of us left with the guy because we felt so bad, and he had been a victim of sexual assault. And it's like, you can't do that to someone. But it was very militant, I guess is the word. And I mean, I still loved her writing and everything, but it was I don't even know what the equivalent would be now. If there probably is an equivalent now. So now I think it's, more like, I don't know, or like women or the non-binary thing too, right? Like it's not like, I think I referenced that in my poem. It's like, well, how can feminism when you have non-binary people now? And it's like a whole new set of issues. And race too. Like I have to say, second wave, they weren't great.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't, like, it was just like, probably didn't even,
Consider.
no. Like Bell Hooks, I read Bell Hooks and everything, but it wasn't like an integrated situation. When I went to these events, I don't remember that many women of color, or certainly not men. I mean, poor guy was like chased out, certainly not men or trans people or anything.
Yeah, certainly I think inclusivity
Yes.
has become such a more central concept.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it's kind of that pendulum swing where, in the effort to pull it in the way that you need it to go, maybe it flips
Right.
too far, like with the Dworkin situation.
Right.
There were so many interesting moments when you were doing your reading where you referenced an inspiration or a line or these emails that you had received to grow your penis. And I thought, could you talk a little bit about your process and how you collect those sparks and kindle them into something?
Yeah, I guess, well, my bag's over there, but I always have a notebook with me, right? So like weird billboards, I have a file, files and files of, just stuff. Because I was telling Kim's here, a participant in Writers in Paradise, and I really think, I always tell people, like, don't start with the blank page, or I can't start with the blank page. It's just too like a grave, like there's not, or a death or something. So I think even if you just have like a quote by someone else, or a really weird phrase that you hear, or even like Howard Stern, like, how could he be in a poem? Well, he can be in a poem, like you can get these like little sparks, and I probably use 1/10 of them, but I'm always writing them down, and I think that's important, especially if you have a bad memory, because they'll be gone.
I wanted to follow up on that question because I think that is something that in in that charming poem that Kim has mentioned, you apologized that it was none of the lines were written by you.
Right.
And so my question is really about the poetic method, and is anything that we are capable of saying our own, or does it come from some kind of commonality of other people in the language and the history, and your thoughts on that?
I love that question. I love that question, Hank. I feel like this sounds really witchy, but I feel like even when I'm writing my own poems, or like it's coming out of my hand and my brain, there's something else there. And I don't know if it's collective consciousness. I don't know what it is, but I feel like there is something, just like zeitgeist. Like people have the same idea at the same time, or like. I sound really woo-woo, but like energy or something, right, happening. But I do think we are just vessels of experience, right? So, and what we read, what we think, it's not what we read, what we hear, what we listen to, it all goes into it, right? And so we're probably just like devouring stuff all the time that we're not even realizing. Like our brains are just collecting bits of information, bits of, I don't know, language, an image that we see, and it's like just all in the file cabinet, which is really interesting. But yeah, I do feel like there was I don't know if it's still going on, but maybe like 20 years ago, there was a poetry movement called Flarf. Did you guys hear of this, Flarf? It might have been short-lived, but it was like, we should not write any more words. There's enough words. And you would just go and pick out stuff from the internet and make your poems. And like, that was it. No more. There's too much. It was like almost like recycling, like enough already.
They're on to us.
Like, why do we need another poem? Just make stuff, there's already language out there. Just go for it. And it wasn't really that interesting, but it was such a cool, like kind of like the Andrew Dworkin or the test tube baby, like just theoretically, it's so interesting that you could just go online and, I'll put that in. I'll put, you could just.
Well, I thought there was, obviously it wasn't one you read because it's quite long, but as somebody who was trained as a medievalist, I was really fascinated by the Terza Irma, which was the play on Dante.
Yes.
And that's what I'm really curious about. And was it just the coincidence of Irma with Rima that brought this on? I would love to hear.
Thank you. I want to read that poem, but it would have not even, anyway, it's 26 pages long, so brace yourself. But it's really like, it's in Terza Rima, which is Dante's Inferno, so it's a really tight rhyme scheme, really tight syllabic form. And in 2017, 2017, Irma came. I hope none of you were too impacted in the same way I was, but basically my apartment was destroyed. It was really, I live on the water. It was terrible. And so I had to evacuate. It was awful. So, and build back, and, just as you can imagine. And so, I was writing in my journal, which that's the other thing too, I write in my journal a lot. And I was just like, this is worse than blah, 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 like whatever, every night, just process, because it was so awful. And then I was like, I'm gonna make a prose poem out of this, because I bet it's really good. No, it was horrible. It was things like, I'm gonna die, how is this planet gonna survive? I mean, it was so like one cliche after another, like, how could this, why me? Just terrible, terrible writing, but just awful. But I had kept everything. Like I kept a detailed record, including, and then I'd be like, oh, this image is not bad. Oh, this is good. And it helped me remember. And so one of the first books, when I came back, my apartment was flooded, and I went to the bookcase and things were wet. I was like, oh no. And it was Dante, and I was like, oh, I'm living in my own hell, but it's not fire, it's water. Wait a minute, Irma. And then I was like, okay, I'm off to the races. And it took me a year to write it. It was a really hard poem to write because of the syllabics and the rhyme and the on and on. But I had all this raw material, which was terrible. Pages and pages of everyday trauma that I went through, but I kept it all, and that's how I wrote the poem. And I'm so glad that, so I say, even if your writing is terrible, which, I mean, this is, it's awful. It's embarrassing. I would never even show it. It's so bad. But then even in the terrible writing, I would have like the image of something. And I was like, oh, but there's an image in here. And I was able to recreate. I even had the dates because I kept dating everything. So yeah, so I mean, it's interesting how you can take different approaches to poetry, including like your own journals.
I love that.
Thank you.
I know that we also have Joy. Joy is here. She has got a microphone, so I would also urge you to raise your hand if you have a question that you would like.
The struggle to write a poem about your mother is something that's very familiar to a lot of us, I think. And I wonder about it. I know Helen's struggled with hers, and you're struggling with it. And when I think about poetic process, I think about the role of memory, but I also think about the role of the people that are close to us and are internalized in us, in the way that my mother is always with me, over my shoulder, and in my presence, and in my thinking, and all the rest of it. And I'm wondering if you have any insights into what the stumbling might be about, because I've struggled with it too. It's very, very hard.
Yeah, well, I talked to Helen about it too. I think it's like the mother load, really. I mean, it's like really the primal, right? It's so, and that's not to say, I was really close to my dad, and I don't know, something about moms. I think maybe because our bodies were connected once, or even if we were adopted, it's like that closeness of, like, I don't know what it is, but I think it's a really, if I knew I could answer, except to say that again, like a lot of these poems I wrote while she was in hospice. I mean, they were terrible, but like the germs were there, the kernels, if you will. So I think any kind of memory, I would even like say, don't worry about a cliche, don't worry about being too melodramatic or whatever, because you can always cut back later. Is it the block, or just, is it like a block or too much? Because
some of it for me is because the language that I want to use is so is only shared by the two of us.
Oh, do you mean like you'd feel betrayal?
The poetic language that I would use to describe her or to tell her story was so limited in its experience with other people that finding the universality in it is really, really hard.
Right. Except, I mean, yes, I'm saying, or not even except, right, and I should say, and sometimes the more personal you become, the more universal you are. I mean, you could try it, because I remember Sharon Olds saying that, she writes a lot about trauma more. She's like had a really tough go of it, and she felt the same way, like how many people have gone through this and how odd, she felt like she was alone. And I think when you put in your particulars, even if they seem private and very singular to that person, there's like this, what you gain is trust with your reader, because your reader's like, wow, this person's like letting me in a very intimate way. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I think sometimes there's one thing if you don't want to share it, but there's quite another if you are willing to share it, then it might be more universal than you think. It very well may be.
Kind of on the same subject, I'm curious about whether when your mother was in hospice, you were writing the poems, and did you read them to her, and how did she react, and how did you feel when you read them?
Well, I only read one to her. I read her The Old Lady Smell, and she was laughing. She liked it. But it wasn't as good, it was a rough draft that I read to her. She was, she was, in and out. So, but sometimes I read her others, just like read other stuff to her too. But I wrote those also in, kind of like the Irma poem. I hadn't thought about this before because none of the mother poems are in any fixed form, but they were sort of a mess because I remember the hospice woman gave me a journal for my feelings or something, and I was like, oh, this is, you don't even know the half of it, lady. And I would be writing because I had a lot of trouble sleeping, so I would just write through the night. And I dated everything. And it was really, again, like it wasn't what you heard exactly now, but I was able to have a lot of raw materials because I hate starting with a blank page, so I had stuff that I could use. But yeah, I keep thinking like, oh, I hope my mom likes these. It's hard to say. But she was very supportive.
Hi, Denise. Thank you so
Hi.
much. It was such
Thanks,
a pleasure to
Thank
hear you. So my mom's Canuck, one of 14 children, emigrated from Canada as well.
Nice.
And I, too, my second book is about my mom, now calls me daughter, and her experience and my experience with her Alzheimer's. My question to you is, your poetry is also very personal, lots of details, and I just feel like we really get a chance to get to know you. Did you experience any, or have you experienced any pushback from anyone in your family writing personal experiences?
No, it's so, when I was younger, yes, I had in my first book, Smile, I have a poem about like oral sex as a teenager. That did not go over well. I didn't even think about it. Because it's not really, I shouldn't say, because it's not really about that, but that happens, and that was, I don't know what I was thinking. But like, I gave it proudly to my parents. I just didn't, that was not good. But everything since has been okay. Because they were so Catholic, you know what I mean? They were just like, so they're not so much about dirty laundry, or that was a bridge too far for them. But other than that, they've been, they passed, but they've been very good, actually. I know other people really struggle with it, and I always say, your parents don't have to read it. You know what I mean? And they probably won't. That's like kind of what we were talking about earlier. The pleasure of being a poet is that no one cares. Like, if you don't give it to your mom, what are the odds she's going to find it? Very low. Very low. And even if she Googled, I don't know, like maybe parents are different now, but my parents didn't know what was going on. There's like, only if I gave them a book did they know it existed, because they read like mysteries, or, like it wasn't like they read Sharon Olds or Gates, or, they didn't know. So I was kind of lucky in that way, I suppose.
Yeah, my mom with Alzheimer's actually had my book, but only couldn't get past the blurb, which the blurb described, this poet, blah, 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 with their mother with Alzheimer's. And she's like, oh, she has Alzheimer's? She's like, I don't have Alzheimer's. Why does someone say I have Alzheimer's? And that upset her. She couldn't get past that. And it was just, that was a little troubling. And I did also have a brother who just didn't agree with writing an experience that he felt was a very private matter. And so it was just, an interesting journey I had not experienced before in my writing. But I think.
So your book's published?
It is.
Oh, what's the title? You just tell everybody.
Now Calls Me Daughter.
Now Calls Me Daughter. Oh, that's a really good title.
Yeah, just about that present moment, because in Alzheimer's, really, I've learned, it's like my mom's continuing to teach me, even as she's not knowing me, as we can't talk about the past, can't talk about the future, so we really are completely in the moment every time we're together.
That's great.
So it's really interesting how she continues to teach me these lessons. And
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's
well,
beautiful.
thank you. This has been great.
Well, I mean, I know that a lot of people struggle. I don't mean to make light of it because I know a lot of people struggle with, what to write. Because it's not like, oh, I'm going to get sued because you're a poet, unless it's Mattel. Mattel will sue you, but like your mom is probably not going to sue you. But like, do you really want to live with that sort of thing? I'm not talking to you specifically, but I mean, like in general, I don't even know the right answer. I mean, you kind of just have to. When I was younger, I used to say, "It's your story. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do what you need to do." But now I have a more nuanced approach, but I think people have to just do what's comfortable for them,
So the non-poet here, let me tell you, just
Yes.
as a lawyer and a judge, truth is a complete defense, so you're okay for defamation. And I find it's remarkable, because we've all experienced love and loss, that you could hold it together in terms of reciting those poems without your mind drifting to that physical moment. So here's my question as a non-poet, with my wife being the poet. Is there a voice you trust in terms of when you work through your manuscript or your poetry, your creative writing process? Is there a person that you share it with who this person's okay?
Yeah.
And I think the question, and because I have some artistic background, is I think you have to be careful of sharing it with too many people, with too many voices and too much criticism, and you lose sight of what it is you're trying to accomplish by sharing it with a trusted voice.
That's a really good question. So I think, and again, like I was teaching in Writers in Paradise, and these 12, it was 11, but 11 amazing poets, and I think, like I said, not everyone in this class has to love your poem because everyone has different tastes, right? But find the person that gets you, or the few people that get you, that are already on your side, that like that kind of poetry or like your project, like what you're doing, and then use them. Because you can't write a poem by committee. Like, how many people like the flower? Nope. All right. How many? Should I keep the dead dog? Nope. All right. You can't do it that way, and it's not going to be, even the best poet, right? Like I love certain poets, and I'll go, oh, I love them, and then people go, ugh, and they're great poets, and I feel that way about some great poets that I know are great, but I just don't care. It's like I don't care for the work as much as I do others. So I think to find like one or two people, like this is very sad, but my person died. So my friend Maureen Seaton, who's a fantastic poet, like a wonderful poet. Anyway, she died over the summer, so I'm like a little bit in a free fall because I would love to show her this manuscript. You know what I mean? And I can't. So I think, but I have other friends too that I'm sure if I beg them, like just one person, I think I just need one to really say, am I on the right track? But someone, that knows you and that is like, yeah, that's a really good book, but maybe take out these three. And Peter, Mikey, who's here, Peter and I had a really great editor at Pittsburgh Press University, and who passed also this summer, Ed Ochester, and he passed this summer too. So we're in free fall, but we'll find someone for sure.
Hi, I was also a participant at Writers in Paradise.
Oh, hi!
Hi.
I didn't see you. How are you?
I was
Yes,
I
you
was
were
in memoir
fiction.
with Anne.
Right.
And we talked a lot about with memoir like the role that research plays in writing. So I'm just curious about your relationship with research in your poems.
I love research. I absolutely love it. And in Kinky, the book about Barbie, I lived in New York City at the time, and I would go to the Mattel headquarters so I could get, they had like catalogs of the dolls, so I could get the right, like whatever the orange country camper really was called country camper. Like I wanted the outfits right. I wanted 66 bubble cut. Like, I know I have way too much information that I don't really need, but just for authenticity, because I think whenever I'm writing, and I see something that's like, wait, no, that's the wrong, that toy, no, that's toys from like 1960, not 1982 or whatever. You just lose, it's could be a great piece of writing, but you get lost for a minute and you start to question it. So I think Ann's amazing, and yeah, you kind of have to get like what movie came out that year, or make sure it's right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question.
So I wanted to just close by thanking Denise again for an amazing reading and for her openness and intellectual generosity in sharing the answers during this Q&A. So thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that Tombolo's outside if you wanted to grab some of Denise's works, and I'm sure she'd be kind enough to sign those for you. And please be sure you join us next month in March, where we'll have Dani Lawless, who's here. Yes? Yep, Dani. And Dennis Nursky, who will be reading. And then in April, for National Poetry Month, we're going to have a double dose for you. We're going to, on April 11th, which is our customary poetry night, host our second open mic event, which
Nice.
super excited about. And then on April 25th, we'll be collaborating with Eckerd College, as we do every year, and we're going to host Jericho Brown here. So,
He's fantastic.
yeah, lots of amazing things. So thank you again.
So great. He's really good. Don't miss Jericho Brown. He's really good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
It was
Denise.
really